Did you guys hear about black holes? Scientists discovered, right. So there's this thing that just can suck planets. It can suck parts of the universe, spaceships, your tan, it's gone, this thing. But the problem when I was a kid was they didn't tell us where it was. And so I was afraid it might be in my house. And when you look down the hall at 2 in the morning to go to the bathroom and it was black, I really was afraid I might get sucked in. And so I would go down the hall like hanging onto doorknobs and putting my hand out to see if my fingers stayed on. This is true. I was a nervous kid. And all I had to assuage my fears was Chagall, the Holocaust, and planting trees in Israel, the Holy Trinity of my Judaism growing up. So what do? You know, you're looking for some sort of meaning. And I found out that when I was putting on a show, I felt great. And the fear went away. So I was the class clown. I was in the talent show. I did the Purim spiel where I had all the Jews were tied up and put on a railroad track, and by Haman and Mordecai rode in on a white horse while the strobe lights were going, and my 9th grade band teacher played the da-da-da-lunt, da-da-da-lunt, da-da-da-da-lunt. Everyone loved it, and I felt great putting on a show. And then I'd go back and we'd be done, and I would be like nervous, and why am I here? My big fear was infinity. Nowadays they have even bigger scary. They have infinity and beyond. But when I was a kid, it was infinity was scary enough. What's on the other side? And that fear ultimately really that I was going to be alone forever after I went away from here. And I knew about infinity that when you put any number next to it, that number went to 0, right? Infinity plus 1,000,000 is what? Right, so what happened to million? Infinity plus 1,000,000,000,000 is, and what happens to 1,000,000,000,000? Right? My grandmother lived to be 108 years old. God bless her. And she was doing very well. She actually lived with us the last couple months. She wasn't doing as well, so we moved her in with us, and that finished her off. No. She's 108 years old. Give me a break. Wonderful, wonderful woman. But next to infinity, poof. So that was horrifying to me, that you could live on this earth and struggle and fight and be successful and do whatever you want, and when you're done, unless you're a great religious leader or a mass murderer, and unfortunately that's usually the same guy these days, then poof, you're gone. So what do I do about that, right? I put on a show and forget about it. How many people did I need in my audience? We have like 150 people here, 200 people, that's great. We did this same event in South Africa for the chief rabbi. Rabbi Manish Friedman was there. We hung out with him and a bunch of other great rabbis. And 3,000 Jews showed up for this program. It was wonderful, very exciting. I've done it for 10 college students when they come in from the University of Maryland. But how many people do you have to put on a show? You got to have one. Well, 2, the guy putting on the show. But in the audience, I need 1. Don't be a smart aleck. You need to make that contact with one person. Because then when the rest of the world is spinning out of control and ISIS is lopping off heads like there's no tomorrow, hey, I don't know what it all means, but for this moment, we're connecting. For this moment, we have a friendship and a bond, and maybe we're not alone. That's really what it was about, putting on a show. And most of us spend much of our life looking for that one person to connect with, and then we spend the next half of our life driving that person out of their mind. And so I would jump back and forth between putting on a show and feeling great and then being kind of nervous and why am I here? And if you jump back and forth fast enough, it starts to look like you're sanely walking down the middle and you're okay. And I probably should have been on some sort of medication. It wasn't as popular back then. These days, half our country, literally, is on some sort of, thank God we have these mood enhancers. Which half of this room is smiling because they have a good health plan? I can't tell. I think it's all of you. So I remember my Sunday school teacher ran into me when I was about 18. I was working at the grocery store, and she came in and she said, David, you used to ask those most interesting questions about infinity and stuff. How's that going for you? And I said, not really any better, thank you. I didn't like that everything went to 0 next to infinity. I didn't want to be a 0. And I didn't know what to do about it. So a little later, as I was finishing up high school, I was working at the bakery. And it was Christmas Eve, and the baker basically said, look, you're the Jew who can work on Christmas and Easter and the Super Bowl. So why don't you can have all the pies because we're not going to be open tomorrow. Take them to your friends and give them out for Christmas presents. So okay. The end of the day, I went all around to all of my pals, and I dropped off the pies. And the last stop was my buddy Howard Smithson, best friend from high school. And they were always trying to get me into the church, always trying to get me to believe this stuff. And I just never believed it. because it was crazy, and I would make fun of it. I was a smart aleck, so I would laugh. Oh, Jesus, he's 3 and he's 1, and he's 3. He's like a breath mint, He's up, he's down, he's back, But I didn't really know what I believed. I just knew I wasn't that. But I loved going to church because church was fun. It was fancy, and it was they all sang together on the same key and tempo, which I had never heard growing up as a Jewish kid. And they started and finished together. It was weird. Another strange thing, there was no talking in church. Very bizarre. And it was almost as though they thought God was in the room with them, So that was attractive. A lot of hugging. I like that. But I didn't believe it. So this night, there was something different because Howard had his brother-in-law, who was a youth minister, waiting for me. And the youth minister was smarter than the high school kid, and he knew that he couldn't get me to believe in the Son of God because he knew something very clever. He knew that I didn't believe the Son had a father. I didn't believe in God. So what was the point of talking about a son? So he spent that evening talking about the possibility of there being a God. And he wasn't that eloquent, but he made some good points. Now I think about it, and you think about, he was talking about creation and just looking around. Psalm 19, the heavens are telling of the glory of God. The earth is declaring the work of his hands. Day to day pours forth speech. Night to night reveals knowledge. So basically, he was telling me about creation. And let's look at babies, for instance. A baby is born, and a baby has no teeth, right? But if evolution is an accident, the first baby probably did have teeth. And how did that go, right? Mom is looking at the baby, loves the baby. The baby's looking at the mom. And that's going to end horribly, right? And the mom is like freaking out. It's getting close, like a horror film. And then... And the mother screams and accidentally hurls the baby across the cave. He bounces on the walls, and there's baby and blood and hair. And it's a horrible thing. It's a smear that looks like a man chasing an antelope with a spear. It becomes the first cave art. Maybe the baby's name was Art. We don't know. This is science. So we got to wait a couple zillion years for a baby to be born with no teeth. All right, great. Mama, they get along great. Mama and baby, lunch, right? So then they give the baby a steak. Great. Not stuff. It's bad. I see you've tried to eat a steak with no teeth, sir. So a lion comes in, and everyone runs away, but the baby is stuck there working on the steak, and shoomp, it's lion and steak and blood and baby, and we got to wait 2,000 trillion years for another accidental mutant child to be born with no teeth, who just magically grows teeth when he's 2. And they give him a steak, and he's very happy, and he's eating the steak, and he grows. And then he's 13, and they're having his bar mitzvah and his wedding on the same night because in the cave days, it was a mess. You didn't know how long you were going to last. And all the boys were lined up with their big manly heads and a little bit of hair coming in and a little row of baby teeth. And they looked like freaks. And the girls are over here trying to decide, I'm not going to dance with this guy. You going to dance with him? No. Nobody wants to dance with him, and he dies alone, as so many of us fear we will. And now we got to wait 8 gazillion years for a new baby to be born who has no teeth, who magically grows teeth when he's 2. And then those teeth fall out. But not all at once, because then we're back to the baby with no teeth. No, the teeth just know to fall out now and then until he's ready for more teeth. And then the wisdom teeth and the molars, and it goes on. And you end up 8 trillion years later with me. Right? And it's just an accident. We know if you take carbon-based compounds and shake them up and throw them in the oven and wait for 8 trillion years and let the universe split into all of its possible quantum physical potentials, eventually you'll get some combination that looks like what we have here today. Babies and teeth and butterflies and cocoons and frogs and the blood that goes in the bloodstream, the same blood carrying the poison sewage and the oxygen and the vitamins, all just kind of whisking through the system. And it's all just an accident. Would you want that in your house? The pipes to carry the sewage out past the cave. Flushing the toilet. Nobody cook anything in the sink for a little while. That would not be good. But no, the body just does it. It's not a problem, right? And probably the first nose was upside down so you could breathe better, but the guy went out in the rain and he drowned. So we had to start over. That didn't work out at all, right? So, but it's an accident. When he was done, had he proven there was a God? Because you can't prove it. You can't prove there's a God. God made it that way. So what did he do? He made it plausible. When he was done, I felt like, you know what? It takes as much faith to believe that there's no God as it takes to believe there is a God. And with a God, he was introducing something which, had I had a Jewish education, I would have known was a Jewish idea. But at the time, I thought it was a Christian thought. You have a soul that goes to infinity. And there's a place, they call it heaven, that is infinity. My mother had passed away about that time. I would see her again. That sounds good. And with this desire to connect with infinity, I bought into some Jewish ideas thinking they were Christian. And I got down on my knees and I prayed the prayer they said to pray. And for no extra charge, they threw in the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. And I was a Christian. And I did that for a year. I didn't really believe it, but I liked the hugs. And showing up at church as a Jew makes you're doing a show, you're putting on a show. Hey, the completed Jew is here. Hey, it's Dave. He's our Jewish brother. And I was a star. Just being there made me important. And so I like that. And I like the hugs. I like that singing on key. I kept going back. Then they sent me to a camp where they added an intellectual dimension. Some theologians were there. They were talking about Helmut Thielicke and Soren Kierkegaard, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was a Protestant minister who gave his life during the Holocaust to try and kill Hitler and wound up dying in one of the camps alongside Jews and gypsies and gays and elderly and anybody that Hitler wanted to kill, because he was a righteous person who knew this was wrong. And hearing all that gave my Jewish brain something to latch onto, and now I was in. A year of this, you become what you do, so be careful what you do. And I became a Christian, and I loved it, and I believed it. I didn't know any better. In the valley of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. If you have nothing, something is a huge improvement. And the devotion to God was a beautiful thing. Again, a Jewish idea. So I was in, and I said, hey, I want to do something useful. What can I do? Put me to work. And they said, well, what do you do? I said, well, I like to put on a show. They said, great. And they made me the media director for the high school group. I started doing all the skits and plays and slideshows. You'd come in Wednesday night as a high schooler. You'd see a funny comedy sketch. You'd see some multimedia. And then a rock band would play. And then the pastor would give the sermon. And everybody come up. And we were making Christians. Did that for a number of years. About third or fourth year, I was doing it with a young lady who I'd met there a couple years earlier, and we were doing the work together and kind of falling in love. And she went home one night and asked her mom about our getting married, which was an interesting question because we'd never talked about it. And her mom said something fantastic. She said, look, David has never really gone after this showbiz bug that has bitten him. And he's doing this stuff in the church, but if you don't send him to L.A. and make him try it for real, one day he may wake up and resent you. But if you send him and he loves it, then you'll know that's what he's about, and you got to ask yourself, is this what I want? And if you send him and he doesn't like it or he doesn't succeed and he comes back, then you'll know this is for real. What a smart lady. My mother had passed away, so she had become sort of a surrogate mom. I'm still in touch with this woman now and then. She writes me a postcard. We keep in track on Facebook. She's very proud of my career. I don't talk to her daughter anymore, just to be sane. But I have a gratitude for her. 8 days later, I moved to Los Angeles, moved back to L.A., went to Pepperdine University, where I had gotten my business degree from my dad. But while I was at Pepperdine, all I had done was theater. I did all the spring sings and talent shows and musicals and drama. And I went back and I said, hey, guys, to the theater professors, can I just audit classes or something? And they said, sure. They knew me well, and I started doing that. One of the professors there, who's now the lighting director for all of the Disney theme parks, great guy, said to me, David, look, there's none of these kids are really that serious about it. There's no money in theater. You should go to film school. All right. So I applied to film school, USC's film school. USC has, and did at the time, still has the greatest film school in the country and maybe the world. The thing was, I didn't know anything about film, but it turned out they didn't care. They could teach you film. What they wanted, fortunately for me, was someone with something to say. And they didn't care what it was. They had communist filmmakers, and they had gay and lesbian filmmakers. They had Vietnam vets. They had ex-priests. They had one ex-priest, lesbian, Vietnam communist, I think. Why not? Why not the born-again Christian Jew who wants to make movies for Jesus? I wrote that in my statement. I want to share the gospel with the world. Film is the most powerful medium. You're the best film school to teach it. Please let me in so that I can share the gospel through film. And they let me in. Mailman came on a Sunday. I said, this is the voice of God. I'm supposed to do this. My dad said, this is the voice of your father. Go to med school and I'll pay for it. I said, Dad, the mailman came on a Sunday. I've got to do this. charged up all my credit cards, took all the money I'd saved in the bank to pay my auto insurance for the rest of the year, and I signed up at USC County General's program. They give you, to be a test person, they put you in bed for 6 hours, and they pump you full of cold medicine to see how you do, and they give you $75. And it didn't have a lot of effect on me, except I had 75 more bucks to make my student films, and I didn't get a cold for a week. So that was good. And I was in film school, and I did a short film there called The Man Who Loved Fat Dancing. I led Bible studies with my Christian filmmaker friends, and the ministers, the elders and the deacons of my church, at the Presbyterian Church, laid hands on me in Ventura and sent me as an ordained lay missionary to Hollywood. And off I went. I was going to change the world. So my film, after about 3 years, I made this graduate film called The Man Who Loved Fat Dancing, which was a crazy action comedy Christian adventure film. And it won some awards, and it screened at the Academy for the best student films of the season. And they were introduced by the late Sidney Pollack, who was one of my heroes as a writer-director. Yeah. So, and you go into that theater, and Sidney took us all out for dinner beforehand, and I didn't know any better, so he started giving us lobsters and oysters and clams and slimy things, and we're eating this stuff, and we're talking to Sidney Pollack, and then we go to the Academy Theater, and there's a huge, beautiful theater on Wilshire Boulevard, these big golden Oscar statues. I think you would have called them avotazoras. And they were up there, and I was blown away. And then Sidney Pollack stands up. My film screens last because it was the funny one. And he says, "Ladies and gentlemen, the filmmaker David Weiss." And I stood up in the middle of that theater with a couple thousand agents and producers and lawyers and studio people. And the crowd was going crazy, and I was putting on a show in my tuxedo next to my dad, standing up. It was intoxicating, and I said, "This is. I'm not going back. This is amazing." And so I had breakfast with like 12, 13 agents over the next couple of weeks, signed with an agent. The agency said, "Look, kid, we can't sell this short Christian action adventure stuff. You got to write something we can sell." So I went, "Okay." And so I wrote a long action Christian adventure comedy film, and nobody wanted to touch it. And then this Mormon producer came in looking for a writer he couldn't afford. And the agency said, "Look, you're a Mormon. He's a crazy Jewish Christian guy. Maybe there's a shidduch, you know." And so I said, "Look, I really don't want to do a Mormon movie," because I had my standards. So we settle on a Judeo-Christian action-adventure comedy film. And that's my first professional gig out of film school. We write this thing. And he had produced a movie called Where the Red Fern Grows. He was the writer on that, so I knew he was like a real guy. Nobody wanted to touch that movie. He sends it to Ireland, where Don Bluth, the animator who had done American Tail, the little Feifel Mouskowitz movie, Don was also a Mormon, and he thought maybe this guy Don would fund his movie. Don wasn't interested in live action, but he liked the writing, and he thought it was funny. And I get this phone call on a Friday afternoon, "Can you come to Ireland for 2.5 weeks to do a rewrite on this little movie we're working on?" And I'm like, "When?" And they said, "Tomorrow." I said, "Tomorrow's Saturday? I can't go to Ireland on Saturday. I can't travel on Saturday because the passport office is closed on Saturday, and I don't have a passport." So Monday morning, 8 o'clock, passport, plane at 3, Ireland. And I end up working, it turns into a 2-year assignment. And the first movie we do is All Dogs Go to Heaven, which is my first film. And thank you. I love that little film. And I was interested in heaven. What can I say? So when I realized I was going to be staying that long, I came home for the Christmas break, packed some more stuff. Church elders laid their hands on me, ordained me as a lay missionary to go to Ireland. I went back to Ireland, and I went to my local Presbyterian church and said, "Hey, do you guys have a youth leader?" That's what I do. And they said, "We don't." And I became the youth director at Adelaide Road Presbyterian Church, which is a lovely little church 3 doors down from the local synagogue, the Orthodox synagogue, which I did not know was there for a year and a half till my grandmother came to visit me. 85-year-old grandmother at the time came to visit me and wanted to go to synagogue for Friday night, and we had to find this. I had been walking by it for a year and didn't know it was there. So I'm doing this youth work at the church, and in the evenings, Wednesday nights, Sunday mornings, and leading the youth choir, and then I start teaching a class in the Old Testament, which I loved because I remembered I had the picture books as a kid in Temple Beth Torah, and I knew those stories. But now we're getting to these Jewish festivals with the 10 rams and 3 sheep and 4 goats and 3 lambs and a partridge in a pear tree. And I couldn't follow any of it. So there was a guy in the studio with a little comedy hat. And And he was a hip guy, a cool guy, which made no sense to me because I knew from the hat he was Orthodox. And I had never met an Orthodox person, but I knew they were scary. I knew that they were terrified of lobsters. But here was this guy who was a normal, hip guy, very popular. People liked him. You know, girls seemed attracted to him. He wasn't a freak, but he was wearing the thing, and I knew he was Orthodox. I had steered clear from him for the year because of my preconceptions about these crazy Orthodox Jews. And he had steered clear of me because he thought that I was a Jew for Jesus, which I never was. Those guys give me the willies. I just don't understand them. It's like Jews for Jesus makes about as much sense as vegetarians for Burger King. Like, where's that going? It's like, what are they thinking? So I asked him if he'll come teach the class. He says, sure. He comes. He teaches. He won't go to the church. He goes in a living room. 2 nights over 2 weeks. And he's phenomenal because he has what I don't have, a Jewish education. And he teaches us the agricultural significance and the spiritual significance and the halacha, which was apparently there were laws involved, and the rituals. And it was fascinating. Everybody was mesmerized. And when he was done, I took him to coffee and I said, look, David, this is amazing. Your dedication to your religion is so admirable. And you bring your own food and you don't work on this Saturday. And why? It's beautiful, but it's a dead religion. And you don't have a temple. There's no sacrifices. You don't have really control of Jerusalem. Most of the world hates you. I have JC. He died for my sins. I'm cleansed. And when I pass away, whoosh, off I go to heaven. I wasn't trying to convert him. And I said, I don't want to convert you. You seem happy. But why? And he proceeded to explain to me Jewish theology from my Bible, which was horrible for me because it was words that I believed that said things like, I don't even want your sacrifices, says Hashem. I want the offering of your lips. I want you to talk to me. I want you to pray. And then I want you to turn around. He called it tshuva. I want you to turn around, stop doing the wrong thing, and do the right thing. Fix it. I can't steal your walker and go, oh, what a great walker. Jesus, please forgive me for stealing this man's great walker. Look at me go. No, I got to give back the walker. And then I got to say, I'm really sorry. And he has to forgive me. And that made a lot of sense. And that was depressing. Because I was Jewish. He was Jewish. These are Jewish thoughts. But it's too far away. I can't go that far. I can't be like him. He's a freak. I love driving on Saturday. It's my favorite day to drive. I love lobster. It would be easier to buy a bicycle and move to China and get a robe and Chairman Mao's book and become a Chinese person. Ding-a-ling-a-ling-ling-ling-ling-ling. Like, that would have been easier than become like this crazy Orthodox guy. But what he was selling was beautiful. So what do? There's a cognitive dissonance. I was depressed. I moved back to the States and switched churches so nobody would ask me to do youth work and didn't really know what I believed. I didn't want to give up what I had known for, at that point, 12, 13 years was my life. And yet what David Steinberg made so much sense for Jews. But giving up work on Saturday? I work in a business where people work 24/7. A lot of the writers are coked up out of their brains back then. And I'm going to go, hey, look, the sun's going down. I'm done. Friday, bye. Saturday, I'm not even going to bother coming in. No, God runs the world. Ha! It wasn't going to happen. Well, in this sort of depressed state, I ran into this guy, Michael Medved. I don't know if you guys have heard of Michael, but yeah, he should be well. He should have a refuah shalema. He had a little trouble with his throat, and he's doing well, thank God. So Michael we were on a board of advisors for a film festival, and I had thought he was a Christian because they were always quoting him in Christian publications because he's conservative. And then I see the little hat on, and I think, vegetarian for Burger King. And he says, no, I'm just a Jew. Come to my house for Shabbos. And that's what he says, Shabbos. Like he spits all over me. And I'd never heard of Shabbos. I'd heard of the Shabbat and the Sabbath, but this Shabbos is apparently the day of rest on which your mouth just falls asleep. So I go to his house, and we have Shabbos. And it's gorgeous. And there are these kids running all around the table with this bright look in their eye, just gleaming. They didn't have a zero in their eye. They had I know what I'm about. I know why I'm here. I'm having a great time. It's Shabbos. The table was spectacular. I said, this is like Christmas dinner. do you guys do this once a year? And they're, no, we do this every week. And I'm like, damn, these people have a lot of energy. And the parents, they said they were shepping nachas, right? And I thought they said they were schlepping nachos. And I'm like, I love nachos. Like, yeah, let's do it. So I keep going back because it's beautiful and it's also depressing because it's so beautiful. But and I would, if I ever have kids, I would want them to have this. I would want them to have this. But I knew for them to have it, I had to have it, and it was too far. So I kept going back with this sort of attraction, revulsion. I didn't know what to do. And about that same time, I meet this woman in church, a new woman. The other one had given up. I'd been gone to Ireland for 2 years and film school for 3, and I wasn't coming back. So, but this woman was attractive. I thought, well, there's still reasons to go to church. And so we start dating, and after a while, Michael invites me to shul, right? He says, oh, come to shul. When should I come? 10:30. Great. I get there. They're putting the Torah away. The rabbi says some amazing stuff, and then they sing a little song, and there's some schnapps, and we're done. Had I known they started at 8 o'clock, I would never have gone. But it's their little bait and switch. What are you going to do? So I was enjoying it, and the teaching was amazing, and it resonated. It resonated, right? So after a while, my girlfriend says, what are you doing on Saturdays? You're always busy on Saturday morning. I'm like, I'm going to shul. What? Shul. It rhymes with cool, but it's not. And she says, well, I want to go. I'm like, tall, blonde, Presbyterian girl. I said, she's not going to fit in, right? But I don't want to tell her that. So I say, oh, sweetie, you're not going to like it there. It's weird. There are women with hair on their hair. There are men they got hats on their hats. There's a guy with a strimal there. You've seen the furry, that's like an inner tube with fur. And I always thought those things were funny. I wanted to get one. Like I would get one, except I was afraid like if someone left the window open, it got out. Like, does a strimal have a natural predator? That was my question, because then pretty soon they're like running around the neighborhood. A bunch of strimals get free, and they mate with a poodle, and you get a little litter of baby strudels running around. So I didn't actually think that, by the way. And then I said, but the other thing, sweetie, there's the fence. That's going to be a problem. There's the Great Wall of, right? Women and men, they can shop for Cheerios on the same aisle at Safeway. They can ride the bike on the bike path together, but you get them together in the same room in prayer without the fence, and it's on, right? So she says, I want to come. I'm like, all right. So she comes. She sits on her side of the fence, and she loves it. She loves it. She always loved God. She was never that comfortable with JC. It's odd. She's dating this Jewish guy who won't shut up about him. And she's the Presbyterian, and she just loves God. So, and I think what she loved was that I wasn't sitting next to her squeezing her hand the whole time going, oh, don't you love this hymn? Oh, isn't this a great passage of the New Testament? Oh, I love when the pastor does blah, blah, blah. No, it was her and a bunch of comfortable, confident women quietly engaging with their Creator, not thinking about the men on the other side of the fence. The men on the other side of the fence were thinking about the women. But we had the fence, so it was good. She loved it. We kept going back. And what brought us back was this amazing, the rabbis would take a word. They would take a word and they would turn it into a resonating meal. Whereas in the church, it was basically a whole bunch of words, and it all sort of boiled down to believe in so-and-so. I'll give you an example. Shema. And I was like, cool, I know the Shema. That I remembered from Temple Beth Torah. And some things stick, which is good because then it gives you some place to come home to. And I thought, oh, yeah, the Shema. And he said, and you shall take these words which I have commanded you this day, and you shall place them where? In your heart, in your heart. And he says, as rabbis will say, very good. That's not quite what I had in mind. You're an idiot. No, he didn't say that. But he said, really what it is on your heart. And I'm like, in, on, around, who cares? What's the difference? Oh, no. The rabbis say, there are no accidental words in the Torah. Every word was placed there by Hashem. If it's on, it's on. If it's in, it's in. Like, come on. These guys have all the time in the world to study the difference between in, on, around, near, and the, but they have no time to shave. What is that about, Rabbi? So So he brings down the Kutzke Rebbe. Now I'm in because I just love the name. The Kutzke Rebbe. He sounds like Popeye's rabbi. I'm Kutzke the Rebbe man. Kutzke the Rebbe can. So the Kutzke Rebbe says that the reason it says on is because your heart is like a stone. And it doesn't open very easily. Nothing goes in very easily. Once in a while, you have an ecstatic experience, and your heart opens up. A beautiful sunrise, a beautiful Bashert meeting with someone you're going to fall in love with, a symphony, a baby with the perfect teeth, right? And your heart opens. And if in that moment you have stored up on your heart words of truth and kindness and justice and mercy and taking care of the sick, and honoring your parents, and taking care of the poor, taking care of the planet. Torah, if that's on your heart, then when your heart opens up, it falls in. If all you have on your heart are 7 seasons of Breaking Bad and Lady Gaga's greatest hits, then when your heart opens up, you get rah, rah, ooh, rah, rah, gaga, ooh, la, la. And that is really not as helpful in a time of crisis as you might imagine it would be. So we kept coming back because that was the kind of gold we were getting, and it was resonating. And we both loved God. We just had not been taught who he really was. But we're falling deeply in love, and we're having these amazing experiences, and we want to get married, and they're not going to really have us do that in the synagogue at this point while we're taking all of our Jewish stuff into the church. We were doing for a while the Shabbat dinner at our house with the cassette recorder and a huge stereo playing the benching, right? Symphony orchestra. Shir hamalos b'shuv Adonai. And it was like the neighbors going, what the hell's happening over there? The non-kosher Chinese delivery coming for the dinner. And then for the Seder, we would have the 3 matzahs, as they do, right? For the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. And I kid you not, and the holes in the matzah for the holes in his hands. It was a whole thing. And they loved it in the church. But the more we learned in the synagogue, the more we realized that what we were doing in the church wasn't making sense. And it was going actually counter to the words that Moses said were forever. Like little things like keep Shabbat is one of the 10 Commandments. And my Christian friends thought it was great that I was keeping Shabbat now in my weird sort of Christian-y Jewish way. But as I started to point out that some of the other teachings seemed against what Moses had said, and Moses' words were supposed to be forever, what's going on? And we became slightly less popular. But we were getting married, and we needed a place, and so we got married in the church under the chuppah with the big neon cross in the front. I have these pictures in my house. I don't have them out, but they're there. And the only rabbi that would do it was the Jews for Jesus rabbi. He would come with the Presbyterian minister. It was like a circus, and my father was in the back row just going, what the heck is going on? But he was there, good sport. So now we're married, and my wife enrolls us in this Introduction to Judaism class, which really becomes our date night up at the University of Judaism. And after about 6 months of it, she says, it was a conservative program, I think. She said, I'd like to convert, but I don't know that I want to convert here. I really want a conversion, because they were talking about the way things are in Israel and other places, and there were some people don't accept this conversion. She said, if we ever have kids, I want us to have a conversion that's bulletproof. I want the Mercedes-Benz of conversions. It's a weird thing to put with Jewish conversions. But so I'm okay. So she signs us up with these long-bearded rabbis at the RCC, the Rabbinical Council of California. And she's learning, and I'm learning, and we're doing this stuff together. And we stopped going to church because you can't do that and go to church. They won't have you. And other thing was we'd already given up on the church because you go to church all day Sunday and synagogue all day Saturday. It's very tiring. When do you go to Costco? It's like it's like, seriously, just pragmatically, it was a disaster. So now, after a while of this learning, she says, I'd like to make the kitchen kosher. And I'm like, oh, well, that's a lot. We hadn't talked about that. And I had a panic attack. I really did. I had an honest-to-goodness panic attack. But I'd learned from one of these rabbis in one of the talks that love means what's important to you is important to me. I'll come another time and give you my longer lecture on that and how that went. There's Rabbi Orlowek. It's a very wonderful story, and it's very hard to do that. It sounds like a cliche. Very hard, man, if you know at all what it is to listen to your wife and care when she's talking about things like the streaks on the dishes because the dishwasher didn't do it right because the cleaning lady put in the wrong soap. I'm like, just please stop talking. I don't care. And she sees that I don't care, and then she's hurt because she doesn't care either. She just cares if I care. But if I care, then her eyes light up, and I feel that I'm impressing her, and she feels loved, and then her eyes light up more, and then I'm like, wow, I'm really cool because I care, and she loves me, and I'm the man. And then I go off and I get a better job because I have all this confidence because I cared about the thing that she cared about. I do that right twice a year. And she says, you don't tell that story about the dishwasher when you're traveling still, do you? Because you don't do that but like twice a year. I said, next year I'm going to do it 3 times. You know how hard it is, right? But she wanted the kosher kitchen. And love means what's important to you is important to me. By the way, if you watch Shrek 2 again, and I don't get residuals, it's a cartoon. I don't get residuals on that, so I'm not selling it. I'm just saying that whole movie is about Shrek trying to figure out what's important to Fiona because we got stuck on a theme, and I'd heard this from Rabbi Orlowick, and I mentioned it to Andrew Adamson, the director, and he liked it, and we started writing very quietly in that direction. And Jeffrey Katzenberg, who hated our first theme, which is marriage is hard. We thought, that'll be encouraging. People go to see the movie, and they say, yeah, Shrek and Fiona have to work at their marriage. We're doing okay. And Jeffrey Katzenberg said, are you kidding me? He used a lot of language that I won't use here. Are you kidding me? Marriage is hard? Do you think that's going to be the theme? People are going to pay $15 to see the marriage. The reason they're going to the movie is to forget how hard their marriage is. It's like, now what do we do? So I pitched him Rabbi Orlowick's thing, and it landed. And if you watch that movie again, you'll see that's what it's about. So I come home about 2 weeks later forgetting all about this, looking for work because my Christian contacts were pulling away from me, and there's nobody in Hollywood really that will hire you because you're starting to keep this crazy Jewish hobby of yours and not working on Shabbos. And then they were adding new holidays not to work on. There was Shavuos, and there was like, did you know there's 2 extra days of Pesach? And I think at one point they just started making up holidays to see, David, are you keeping Roof? Just to see if I would, oh, yeah, what is it? Oh, well, it's 12 days in Israel, it's 6 days in Bolivia, and it's 9 days in LA. Okay, I'm in. Just sign me up. So I'm having a hard time finding work, and we're having a hard time having kids, and it's getting a little trickier. And I remember I came home one day, and there was a Chabad rabbi in my driveway, with my beautiful blonde wife and all of our kitchen utensils and a blowtorch from the Korean War. And he was just... It was like a scene from Armageddon, you know. And David, I'm sorry, but I can't make this kosher. And I said, no, because you've melted it into the driveway. So, and then my beautiful bride says to me, honey, the kitchen's kosher now. Please don't trafe it up. Like, who are you? So, like 6 months later, I'm at my favorite breakfast place. We're there together, and I'm reading the paper, and she's just having like juice and coffee and toast, I think. I'm having my bacon and eggs. And I look at her, and I'm thinking, I'm going to take this bacony guy into her beautiful kosher kitchen. Like, it just didn't seem right. I said, maybe I'm not going to have the bacon anymore. And she says, good for you. And like 6 or 7 months later, we're there again, and I'm having just the eggs. And I'm looking at the eggs, and like the eggs are coated in the bacon fat, you know, and maybe we shouldn't eat here anymore. And she said, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's not eat here anymore. And like 6 months later, we're at Johnny Rockets having a cheeseburger and a milkshake. And we're like, what are we doing? So we moved into that really fun middle place where we'll eat stuff. We'll have some fish and some chips and some veggies and maybe a chicken. I don't know. We weren't sure what to do, really, but we weren't eating bacon and eggs anymore. That was out, and milk and meat together. So, and then we were parking further and further from shul, right? You walk, and at one point, I think we literally went, "Hey, that's our house," right? So, like, what are we doing, right? So. And it turned out that the other direction, like a half a mile away, there was another synagogue. Like there's 8 miles that way. And so we start going to the new synagogue. But it was an interesting time because we were really getting involved in this. And I was out of work, and we weren't having kids. It just wasn't happening. And I was starting to wonder if maybe God was mad at me, like maybe I had made the wrong choice. So I go and I sit under this tree with this young rabbi. He looked like he was 13. You know how these crazy rabbis, they learn all this Torah, and so they stay really young. He looked 13. He had the wisdom of a 19-year-old. No, he was like talking to this old sage. And he said, look, David, your problem isn't that you married the wrong woman. this woman is going on this incredible journey with you. This is a miracle, what's happening to you. Your problem is you have low self-esteem because you're out of work. Let's get you a job teaching creative writing at the local Jewish day school, just to have something to get out of the house. I'm like, okay. And then he goes, and you got your mornings free, right? I'm like, yeah. Why? And he says, you can come to Minyan. And I'm like, you guys do this during the week? He's like, we do this 3 times a day. So 6:30 in the morning, I show up, and there's all these guys wrapping up their arms with the GPS boxes, right? So God will always know where they are. I get some tefillin, I put them on, and I'm wrapping them up, and then I get to the... And when I was in Ireland, it felt amazing to put on the tefillin. When I was in Ireland, for a little while, I dated a Catholic girl. I was never a Catholic. I wasn't into it, but I liked the girl. So I would go. But I loved the thing they did where they made the sign of the cross on themselves. It's called genuflecting. They little move they do where they touch here and here until they've made that shape. It's good the Jews don't do that, because with the Jewish star, we'd be like all day doing that. You know. So davening is long enough, let me tell you. Add that in there. So I put on my tefillin, and then we say, and they shall bind them as a sign upon your arms, and they shall be fronted between your eyes. And I'm like I'm genuflecting in the synagogue. Is anybody else genuflecting in the synagogue? And we were all genuflecting in the synagogue, and I realized the reason it had felt so good. I was the only Protestant I knew. I've never met another Protestant that did that move. I did that move for years. Because it felt good. It felt good because it was in my bone marrow, because my people had been doing it for 5,000 years. And I was coming home. Now, I'm not going to say that because I put on tefillin, then suddenly my prayers were answered and everything went just my way. Things happened. It turned really good after that, but God is not a vending machine. I'm sure there are people who pray and then they get hit by a bus, God forbid. And we would call these people idiots for praying in front of a bus. But I think when you show up at 6:30 in the morning and you surround yourself with a bunch of men who are off to do amazing work that day. There were appellate court lawyers who were arguing cases with the Supreme Court. There was a heart surgeon who was the chief of surgery at UCLA. There was a laser expert who was working on the system that was the forerunner to Iron Dome. These guys were doing important stuff, and they felt that it was best to start their day wrapping themselves up in God's word, and to shelter themselves in the shadow of God's wing with their tallis. And the Christians had taught me to appreciate that kind of rhetoric, that we are all about the Father. We're all about our Creator. We're all about Hashem. So as I said, I have a hakor, a tov for my journey, because when you go from nothing to something, that's a big jump. But when you go from something to the Almighty, that's a real jump. And I think the other thing was just being with these men who accepted me. It wasn't there, oh, look, here's the Christian that's coming to shul. Cool. They didn't care about that. I wasn't a Christian anymore. They were like, hey, here's a brother. Here's a Jewish brother. I'm out of work. They're amazing. I didn't feel out of work with them. I was welcome there. I belonged there. So I kept coming back. And within about 4 or 5 months of that, putting on the tefillin, my writing partner and I landed a job at the Rugrats with Nickelodeon. And that led to Rugrats, the movies, Rugrats Hanukkah, Rugrats Mother's Day, which was an Emmy nomination, and a whole relationship with Nickelodeon and Paramount that went for years. At some point, we wound up with a 2-picture deal with offices on the lot. It was a great run at Paramount. And that led to us getting the job on Shrek 2. Again, I'm not going to say it's because I put on tefillin. There was an attitude shift that came from being surrounded by my successful brothers who were committed to walking a life as servants of God. So that's where I was headed. Now, one last little story. See here. I've got to make sure I time out. I had seen the timer over here, and this rabbi I got 5 minutes. Thank you. Or they kill you. That's what happens here. I'm actually wired with tasers. Rabbi Herschel. So last story. It's good timing. But I still needed a gig that had health insurance because animation wasn't doing that. And no residuals. So we wanted to get into TV. Has residuals, health, and pension. We write a script to try and get a job on the Sybil Shepherd show. Sybil was a big star earlier, and she had her own TV show. And they like our script. We get invited in. They like the meeting, and they offer us the job. They tell us that they work on Friday nights shooting, and they rewrite on Saturday, and I keep my mouth shut, as my lawyer told me to do, because if they don't offer us the job, we have nothing to talk about. So let's at least find out. They offer us the job. And then when they find out that I can't work on Shabbos, they're furious because they think it's a trick. Now I'm going to sue them for religious discrimination, and they feel that I've been dishonest. It was a bind, because if I was honest and said I work on Shabbos, I don't work on Shabbos, they never would have hired me. I would never have known the quality of my work with them. So I said, look, guys, I'm really sorry about any misleading. If you don't want to hire me, you'll never hear from me again, except to thank you that you thought my work was worthy of your show. But if you could see your way clear, I will work 24/6. I will work Christmas, Easter, the Super Bowl. My writing partner will work 24/7. He's not Jewish. Please, we need the gig. And Bob Myers, the head writer, said, look, I got to ask everyone else because they're going to be working when you're not. I'll get back to you. Friday morning, he says that. And we watched the clock all day, my wife and I. About a half hour before sunset, he calls back and says, all right, you're in. But you're going to be working 24/6, Christmas, Easter, the Super Bowl. Your writing partner is never going home. And I said, thank you. I show up for work the next day, and the first thing I notice when you get there is the chef in the kitchen. They have a custom-built kitchen that was built for the comedian Roseanne Barr. And she loved eating, and she loved her kitchen, and CBS built a beautiful kitchen for her. And in this door over here came the Seinfeld crew. Third Rock from the Sun crew came in from over here, and the Sybil Shepherd. We all went around the huge island and all this great food. And over all of it was this big German chef named Gunther. And Gunther was looking over the food, and he had a big mane of blonde hair. He looked like Fabio in a hairnet. And he had hair here, and he would look at the food. And after about a week or two, he noticed that I was not eating his chicken or his beef. And I was taught in film school, you never make the chef angry. He or the star. And the reason you don't make the chef angry is because the star picked the chef. So I'm like, okay, I got to be careful. He's asking me this question, and I barely got this job, and now he's asking why I'm not eating his chicken. Why aren't you eating my chicken? And people are looking like, why aren't you eating my chicken? It's good chicken. I keep kosher. What is this? You're keeping kosher? And everybody is staring now. The guy that barely got the job is pissing off the chef because he has to have a kosher meal, which I didn't say. A miracle. The next thing he says is, what is this? You think I can't cook for the kosher Jewish man? I'm cooking here for the vegan. I'm cooking here for the vegetarian. I'm cooking here for the nut man who can't look at a nut without his face blows up like a pufferfish. And you think I can't cook for this little Jewish man with the kosher chicken? You like this Empire chicken? The Jews like Empire chicken, no? Like, well, and I check with the rabbi, you'd have to wrap it in foil twice, and I got to bump into the oven, it's a whole, and he's like, okay, no problem. I takes the chicken, I wrap it in the foil twice, I put in there with the cream and the butter. I'm like, I cut to the end of the story. The kid who just wanted to put on a show is now in Roseanne Barr's multi-million-dollar custom kitchen with the crew from Seinfeld and Third Rock from the Sun and my own show, Sybil. That wasn't my show, but that's the show I'm on. With a German chef cooking me a custom kosher chicken. And I thought that the baby with the teeth was cool. I can't to this day prove to you that God is real. It can't be proven. But in the years that have followed, I have seen more miracles like that, as have you all, that are just crazy. It turned out that the guy that came to teach that class at our little Adelaide Road Presbyterian Church, the young Jewish man from Chicago, David Steinberg, turned out he was the guy that read the script that came into Ireland and gave it to Don Bluth and said, hey, this guy's pretty funny, you should bring him over. Had no idea who I was. To this day, we are very close friends. He lives a couple blocks from me. Our kids are friends. Our wives are very close friends. I have an incredible hakora sato for this man, the gratitude for this man. And now, thank God, my wife and I have been blessed with two beautiful children who have spent their, thank you, Hashem. They're not kids. They're not little anymore. They're 17 and 19. My daughter just got back from her gap year at Bar Ilan University, where she was in the Israel experience. My son just spent 5 weeks with the NCSY. He's the NCSY chapter president. Look, they're teenagers. I don't want to say they're angels. We got our problems over in California raising kids in a modern Orthodox situation. It's very difficult. But they're beautiful Jewish children, and they're proud of being Jewish. And they grew up saying the Shema. And I would hear their little voices, and I would say it together, and then I'd hear them on their own at bedtime. At bedtime, I would hear, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. God is one. You can take a whole room full of zeros, and you got nothing. An infinity of zeros, and you got nothing. But you put a 1 in front of it, and you got beyond infinity. Our God is the God of that 1. That is the one God. Our God is the God of the one step that you take to get closer to him. If you'd have said to me 22 years ago, I was going to become an Orthodox Jew who kept Shabbos, I would have said you were out of your mind. I would have said you were crazy. It just never was going to happen. And the thought of trying to get there was so depressing to me because it was so far. But the Jews don't need a reason to be depressed anyway. What's the old Jewish joke, right? The Jewish optimist and the Jewish pessimist. The Jewish pessimist says, things can't get any worse. And the Jewish optimist says, sure they can. They're just warming up. What happened was I never did become Orthodox. I never did keep kosher. I took a step. And then I took another step. Then I took a couple steps back because I was terrified. And over 22 years, there was tzitzis. And there were more Jewish holidays. And there was davening, and there was learning Gemara. One little step at a time. And you never know where it's going to take you. And everyone in this room, all this humor, all this story about Hollywood, it's all about you. You don't think so? What step do you need to take to get closer to who Hashem wants you to be? When I speak to college students, I say, look, if you're not doing anything Jewish on Friday night, light a candle before you go to the movies. If you're already lighting a candle, light a second candle and go to a better movie. You see where this is going. If you're not taking any classes, take a class. If you're taking a lot of classes, take one more class. If you're talking all through davening, pick 1 minute and don't daven for that minute. You get where I'm going. I don't know where your journey is going to take you. That's between you and Hashem. A program like this is an incredible resource to help you pick a new path. Because every day God gives you back your soul is a day you get to decide where you're going to go with it and what step you're going to take. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for watching. Click subscribe and hit the notification bell below for daily pearls of Jewish wisdom.